Mr. Vamsi, I think we can start. And can somebody confirm if I'm audible, please?
Yes.
Yes, Ravi, you are audible.
Okay, so this is great, and we shall start. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, considering your time zone. My name is Ravi Verma, and I am the host for today's webinar on the PCI DSS version 4.0. On behalf of QRC Assurance and Solutions, I welcome all of you for this interesting webinar, and interesting since we have a representative from the PCI Security Standards Council itself. Today is a significant day for India since it is National Technology Day, and this is the day celebrated to mark a successful nuclear tests conducted this day in the year 1988, some 24 years back. Please allow me to introduce our honorable guest and speaker, Mr. Nitin Bhatnagar, Associate Director, PCI Council, who leads the Council's efforts in increasing adoption and awareness of the PCI security standards in India. In this role, Mr. Bhatnagar works very closely with the PCI Council management team, payment brands, assessor community, participating organizations, government entities, and regulators. Mr. Bhatnagar is an innovative thinker, speaker, television personality, and a technical writer, and has been often quoted in cybersecurity news stories and by the news organizations including BBC, Economic Times, CNBC, etc. With close to a decade and a half of experience, he has been recently recognized amongst top 50 cyber security leaders of India in the year 2021. He possesses a bachelor's degree in computer science and master's in cyber law and information security from Indian Institute of Information Technology. Mr. Vamsi, can we move to the slide where we see the speakers and the panelists, please? Our next esteemed speaker is Mr. Vamsi Krishna himself, who is the founder and Chief Executive Officer of QRC. Needless to say anything more about him, he is a seasoned professional in this field. We have two panelists with us today, Mr. Kalpesh Vyas, another techno-commercial professional with 20 plus years of experience in this field, and Mr. Venkat with almost 25 plus years of experience, majorly in large banking sectors, nowadays stationed in Wilmington, DW near Philadelphia, USA. Please allow me to make a quick reference on the credentials of QRC. QRC, from the Indian context, is a certain empaneled entity, and of course, globally, a QSA organization which provides PCI DSS, PCI SSF, PCI 3DS certifications. QRC also happens to be a certification body having IAS accreditation for ISO 27001 and 27701, that is ISMS as well as PIMS. QRC is a registered SWIFT assessor and a pioneer in scans and testing services. Needless to say, doing all kind of major assessments like GDPR, HIPAA assessment, etc. Just as some thumb rules of the webinar for the participants, we do have an option of putting our comments on the chats. However, if it comes to question and answer, I would request you to please use Q&A space to park your questions, and our panelists would be happy to address them as we move forward. And now with this, I'm very happy to hand over the baton to Mr. Vamsi Krishna to take this webinar ahead. Thank you so much, participants, for taking out the time and attending this interesting webinar. Over to you, Mr. Vamsi.
Hey, thanks, Ravi, for a nice introduction. When you are actually introducing Nitin, one part you mentioned about a lot of things about him. tell one thing. Just I want to add. He's a very good human being. Down to earth, because my association with Nitin was almost like it's a decade, and I mean from even previous positions also. Now he's heading the PCI, India. But he's a very good human being and very down to earth personality, and we had very good interactions, and it's my privilege. I mean, I would like to thanks Nitin, because after our request, you in your busy schedule, you have taken some time to participate in this webinar, and you would like, I mean, giving your precious time to explain to our audience from the what I call is the horse's mouth. So this is very good thing, and really I appreciate that your gesture, and now thanks for attending, I mean participating in this, and definitely I want to have this interaction with little, because we used to do a lot of webinars, but it's a kind of a explaining, and it's a one way type of things. We are explaining the things, but now because you are the your presence is makes a lot of difference. So I would like to have this is more little interactive. I hope it is fine with you, Ritin.
No, I think Vamsi, thanks for that. I think it's always my pleasure to work with all my QSA fraternity in the country, and supporting them, and educating the entire stakeholders. So I think I should thank you, in fact, giving us an opportunity to be part of this webinar, and create that education and awareness around these standards, and support you in some way. So thank you very much, and thanks to the entire team who has been working working hard in terms of getting this webinar up and running, and trying to get everything planned. Ravi ji, I think, has been really supportive throughout, trying to coordinate and get things in place. So I would like to thank everyone, entire QRC team for having me on this platform, and I look forward to having interactive session, because I think that's the only way we can break the monotony of going through those large presentations, and having people little get bored out of it. But we'll try to make it more interesting having these questions. And I would also again request everyone on the audience to please keep dropping your messages, because we have some great panelists there out. They are the QSAs working for QRC, and I think they will be able to help you answer things that probably we may not be able to cover or answer at this point. So feel free to drop your questions and queries in the drop box on the chat. Over to you, Vamsi.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Nitin. So let me a quick start. I would like to have it like more, as I mentioned, it should be like an interactive and dialogues between the, just we want to hear from you. What is your thought process about the recent changes? It is very recently, the PCI DSS. After a long time, I was eagerly waiting for this, kind of a change. After 2.0 to 3.0. The 3.0 to the 4.0, it's like every time PCI surprises everyone, even including USA companies.
No, I think I think the DSS 4.0 has been in the work for a couple of years, and I think the entire community knew about it, and I think the qualified security assessors, participating organizations, and the ISAs have been giving feedback. I think that's how the industry feedback is helping us in developing these standards. And what most importantly has got the standard change is the changes in the payments, technology, and security has been the driving force for us to get to this PCI DSS version 4.0. And some of the key priorities, I'm sure everyone would be hearing, just for the interest of the audience, I would just like to highlight the key priorities for the PCI DSS version 4.0 are strengthening security and adding flexibility. And how specifically? By continuing to provide the critical foundation for securing payment data in a rapidly evolving ecosystem, promoting security as a continuous process, improving flexibility for organizations using a broad range of methods and technologies. We keep hearing about new technologies today. You hear about IoT, you hear about blockchain, you hear about what not, and who knows, what's going to come next. So we have kept those that into consideration while we were developing we were evolving the PCI DSS version 4.0. And lastly, enhancing the validation methods and procedures so that it becomes easy for the industry to validate requirements, report it, get it right, so that it's a hassle-free journey for everyone. So that's the quite an intent behind why we came up with the PCI DSS version 4.0.
Yes, I mean that's true, Nitin. Just adding this, because now when I will look that, because this is a journey. It's almost like 2 years now. 2018-19 it started,
Yes,
like
yes.
the first draft, and even we also provided some of the inputs during this RFP commenting types, feedback. So yes, there is a lot of changes, and definitely, because it's always there is a, you see, it's always happens like every standard, after a certain period of time it has to be revised,
Correct.
considering the current technological advances happening in the industry, and as well as the current threats which you are actually facing. So in fact, the third version also, I mean, I can see that there is a lot of threats happened, kind of attacks happen on the POS physical devices. So that's point in time again, PCI immediately changed some versions to incorporate that. That's a good part. And definitely the current version, I could see that it is giving more flexibility to the organization. They want to implement not
Exactly.
only the level, even enhancing their security, the posture. I mean, that's what I could see this. It's good that you pointed out the right things, the flexibility in the different. So, I mean, when it comes to, I mean, just I want to have that there is now, there are two different approaches, right? The kind of customized approach, and also the defined approach.
Correct.
So basically, like, I mean, I would like to say, because I understand the customized approach is something new. How you
That's
would
true.
like to look at that, customized? Is it beneficial for the organization, or what kind of organization? I mean,
Yeah.
they should go for this. I mean,
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, Vamsi, and I think we have come up with two validation approaches, and I think those are customized and the defined approach. I'm sure the defined approach is the same that everyone has been doing now in currently. You have a standard, you just have the QSA come in, do the audit, and then the validation happens on the requirements of the PCI DSS. Now there's a new we have introduced the customized approach option with 4.0, and I think what is that, and why this is a change that we have brought in. I think the customized approach, you have to look at as a new validation option in addition to the traditional PCI DSS requirements and testing procedures that everyone is familiar with, and we called it as a defined approach. Now, the defined approach usually follows the traditional PCI requirements and testing procedures to confirm that the requirements are in place. Now, the customized approach provides you the flexibility for organizations to achieve the security objective of a requirement in a different way than a defined approach specifies. Now, with the customized approach, here the entities determine the controls that they will implement to meet the stated customized approach objectives, but are expected to provide clear demonstration. I mean, I will repeat, they have to provide, the organizations here with the customized approach have to provide clear demonstration that payment data is being protected. Now, this approach, supports organizations using security approaches that may be different than the traditional PCI requirements, while the customized approach, providing the greater flexibility for organizations, choosing to use alternate security controls, also allowing innovations in security technologies and methods and flexibility for how the requirements are applied to the different requirements. Now, interesting point for the customized approach, would be this is intended for entities with robust security processes and strong risk management practices, including but not limited to a dedicated risk management department or an organization-wide risk management approach. So that is the one thing that every organization should take into consideration when they are deciding to go for a customized approach.
Okay. So yeah, that is good. So Nitin, yeah, definitely the good part is, I mean, the current, the 4.0 in the customized approach, or even in the current version, they're more emphasized on the risk analysis is one of the very critical part, which they always like, if you, when I checked, other, even I'm working on the PCI since 2.0. So what I can see that the risk, if I search for the risk in the standards, earlier standard it is only one time it appears. It is in the requirement role. But now if I searching, almost every clause is having somewhere, they're connecting that to risk analysis. So
Yeah.
I mean,
So
is that something like, is it, how you look at that? I mean, now we are getting into the little more matured process approach while implementation
yeah, I
of
think see
PCI.
one thing for sure is that the all the industry stakeholders have to understand that the PCI DSS version 4.0 is a whole new standard, right? So by the time you would have seen, there are so many future dated requirements which are best practices until until the standard is retiring. 3.2.1 is going to retire, but we'll come to that. But coming on to the risk, I think there are two kinds of targeted risk analysis requirements in now PCI DSS, which we call TRAs. Now, the first type of is for the requirements where entities can define how frequently to perform an activity.
Okay.
Right? An entity also can use these TRAs to determine the frequency that supports the adequate security for an entity in accordance to the level of risk the entity is willing to accept. This is on the frequency. We will talk about the frequency also, but the second type of TRA is for any requirement that an entity meets with the customized approach. So, and I told you, customized approach has to be chosen very diligently. It cannot be taken by any organization who's just entered into a information security, or they have a even they do not have the basic information security in place. Should not be the organization opting for customized approach. They should still be going for defined approach.
So it means Ritin, do you think that one organization can go for any of the approaches? I mean, categorically, whether they can choose between customized approach or defined approach, or it's a combination of both. Is that flexibility actually it's given,
Exactly.
right? I mean,
so I think so most of the PCI requirements can be met using either the defined or customized approach.
okay.
However, the several requirements do not have a stated customized approach objectives now. The customized approach is not an option for these requirements. So the stakeholders and I think the participants on the call who are undergoing their PCI DSS journey should understand that customized approach is not at all an option for those specific requirements for which the approach objectives are not been defined. Now, entities here can use both the defined and customized approaches within their environment. I'm clear. Hope I'm clear. So I'm making it very clear. Entities can use both the defined and customized approaches within their environment. Now, what it means is an entity could use the defined approach to meet some requirements and use customized approach to meet the other requirements. That's possible. This also means an entity could use the defined approach to meet a given PCI DSS requirement for one system component or within one environment, and use customized approach to meet that same PCI DSS requirement for a different system component or different within a different environment. Now, in this way, a PCI DSS assessment could include your defined approach as well as your customized approaches.
I mean, this is very interesting point, Nitin. I mean, you mean to say, like any one organization, one particular requirement, within the one requirement, there will be different system components. Like we'll just take an example of the antivirus or is any requirement. So one requirement they can choose for specific system components. They can choose the customized approach, or other cases, other system component. They can choose the defined approach. Am I right?
That's correct. That's perfectly.
So it is something like what I can see that this is only happened earlier in case of they are not meeting specific requirements. There is a compensating controls, suppose there is a outdated versions, sometimes they have to define separately the compensating controls to pass on that, mitigate that risk. Is it something like, is it similar like, okay, in some cases, some components are very outdated and they can, customized approach, they can take it up. Is it something similar like this?
No, I think, see, yeah, compensating control and customized approach. Let's not, we cannot do two different things. It's like head and tail. So it's a two different things. So compensating controls are for the entities that cannot meet a requirement due to business or technical constraint.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Entities, implementing an alternative control that mitigate the risk, but there is also most likely an underlying non-compliant system or process that cannot be addressed within the compensating control. Now, often the customized approach objectives cannot be met either. Right? Now, the customized approach for entities that have an innovative approach to meet the objective of the requirement in a different way. Now, here the entity chooses to implement a different control that meets the stated customized approach objective. The entity chooses it, but the specific control that they choose may not meet the specifics in the PCI requirement. Now, the customized approach here requires the entity have a strong risk management practices. You said, right, there are a lot of risks in the standards. So that's where we are focusing. Customized approach requires entity to have a strong risk management practices. And in fact, what I highlighted in my earlier part is that the risk mature organizations should opt for the complete customized approach as an option, right? Now, here, now this way it can help document exactly how the approach meets the requirements objective when it comes to the customized approach. Now, for the compensating control for the audience, because I think there has been always a question, compensating controls and the customized approach almost same. No, it's not. That's what I'm clarifying. Compensating controls are only for the business or technical constraints. When not met, you should be looking for opting compensating control. But for customized approach, it's for the different approaches that you are taking to meet the required objectives of the requirement. Now, so what we have done is that in the compensating control appendices, we have also added clarification that the compensating control cannot be used to retroactively actively to address a requirement that was missed in the past. Now, for example, how do I put it across? ASV scans, for example, it's a very small thing, but ASV scans somebody missed, and you in the past, and you try to put a compensating control. Now that's a clarification that compensating controls cannot be used to address requirement that was missed in the past. Now, for example, also where a task that should have been performed was not performed, just for the layman term I'm explaining, a task which was to be performed, not performed, and no action was taken at that time to address it, addresses where you cannot use compensating controls going forward. So that's the clarification that we have added into the standard. For customized approach also, we have added the appendices D specifically and E in the standard that provides more details on the customized approach template. There are specific control metrics and risk analysis templates that is going to help the QSAs and the organizations to understand on their approach towards customized option.
Great, Nitin. So when I looked at the timelines of this, the implementation, every time normally we look at that any new changes in the PCI standard, generally they will used to provide the 2 years. But here there is some exception here. There are certain controls. They mentioned it's a 3 years, and now there is a debate. 3 years, it's too long. Sometimes people, when I look at that requirements, it's too complex. It may I am not possible to some big organizations to implement the best practices. What is your opinion on that? I mean, the 3 years period. I mean, 3.2.1 will be retired at 2024, but after that also 1 year period has given to the timelines of the best controls, best practices can be mandatory that point in time. How you look at that? Is it really, in your opinion, why the 3 years and 2 years? Can you please put a light on that?
You have to look. Let me talk about the timeline. So PCI DSS version 3.2.1 will remain active for 2 years after 4.0 is not. This 4.0 is released on 31st March, right? So 31st March 2024 is the date when the 3.2.1 will be retired. Now, 2 years time? I think it's a very good question, and I will just like to highlight that why this time, because this is the time. I'll divide it into two parts. Vamsi, for you, the audience interest is that plan, do, check, act. It's a very old methodology of planning and then executing the things, right? So this is the planning phase for the people to understand, read the standard, get a grip on exactly what is the standard all about, right? Do preparing. Now, I would request all your stakeholders on the call today to discuss this with you as a QSA company, because that's the time, post planning, you need to check with your QSA, do work, probably do internal transition work with your QSA to understand what changes that has impacted your organization. Now, check on the feasibility of implementation, and then act accordingly to start implementing. So it's like people ask me, should we start immediately PCI DSS version 4.0, right? Answer is, this is the time you should plan. This is the time you should be discussing with your QSA companies and your QSA the QSAs who are working with you. You should be on their on the toes with these QSAs to understand how this is going to get executed. This is the planning phase. Start and get a grip, a copy of the standard, and then start reading it. If you have any questions, go back to the QSAs so that QSAs can help you in this transition phase, because they are the one who would be trained going forward, and they are the one who would be assisting you in terms of getting these standard requirements implemented. Now, this is where the planning comes until 2024 quarter one, entire quarter 4 2023, do and check, and then accordingly in quarter 2 to quarter 4 act, start having QSs on board and start implementing the requirements and having the validation checks. So this is the implementation timeline. And 2 years, it looks very large, but it's not. To be very frank, for the large organizations, it's the time will fly. You remember COVID came in March, at least in India. I mean, I can remember 5th March. I traveled from Bangalore, and I was like house arrest for 2 years. 2 years passed. We had some bitter and some sore memories with us, but the time passed. It just flew away. 2 years just went by. So, so I think it's a time where organizations should start planning and start getting engaged with the QSs. If not, they have started already. I'm sure the audience would be understanding the importance why I'm telling this, because this is where they will understand whether they should start their journey now or they should start the journey after 6 months or 8 months or 1 year.
Yeah, that's good, Nitin. Actually, in fact, even we received, immediate after now the clients are asking, hey, can we go to the 4.0 now, directly. I said, hold on, even we have to get training, because we have to qualify ourselves first, and there should be a proper planning, for the transition. Okay, so very important. Yeah, I mean, the 2 years seems to be very long, but yes, as you rightly said, it is very less time for the companies, and they're fully established. They have to change over. It's a very interesting thing, Nitin, because one is the normal transition period. And also, like there are certain controls, because there are, we are going through that, like more emphasis on the MFA, and the risk analysis is one of the thing, and roles and responsibility. So, I mean, I would like to understand from you, like, according to you, what is the new requirements which the organization is supposed to look into that majorly? It may consume time, Can you just throw out some lights on that, new requirements in 4.0, other than the customized approach and defined approach?
Yeah, I think, I think you touched on multi-factor authentication. I'll love to talk about that. So multi-factor authentication. So this is a new requirement which is going to be effective from 31st March 2025. And that's where until 31st March 2025, this is the best practice. Now that's where the organization should, if this is a mandatory requirement going to be effective 31st March 2025, you have to start planning now. because
Yeah.
MFA is not a thing that you think that, tomorrow you start implementing, you implement, right? So you have to start planning now. So this is a new requirement. And this is a requirement which is required to be implemented for all access into the CD. When I say all access, all access.
Okay.
Now, the updated standard also has clarified that the multi-factor authentication is required for, I'm going to tell you two options. So first option is that access into the CD, which I just told you. Second is the remote access originating outside the entity's network, and that applying it to one type of access does not replace the need to apply another multi-factor authentication for other access. So these are the two clarifications that we have given when it comes to the multi-factor. The second main major requirement that has got changed is on the password and passphrase. Now there is an increase in the password length from 7 characters to 12 based on the feedback that 7 characters is no longer sufficient. Some based on some modern computing power. So the 12 characters length will be effective again from 31st March, right? Until then, this is the best practice. So if you go for DSS 4.0, when the QSs get trained and we have enough sufficient implementation support, and you are going for DSS 4.0, so it's not mandatory, but this is a best practice. But from 31st March, it's going to be mandatory. Now, for 3.2.1 is still 7 characters is what is required, which is going to be active. Now, we also retained a requirement to change password every 90 days, since for some entities, the password has been the only protection they use, and changing them periodically also prevent formerly breached ones from being reused. So that's the another requirement, change password every 90 days has been.
Yeah.
However, the requirement to change passwords will only apply to systems without MFA. Example, if the MFA is not implemented on systems that are in scope but not in the CD. Now, for systems protected with multi-factor authentication, this password change requirement can be marked as not applicable. Okay. So that is the another change that has come. Now, on the group shared generic accounts, this is one of the major updates. So I think everyone should understand that in version 3.2.1, I'm sure Vamsi would vouch to it, is that the use of these accounts was prohibited. And now the requirements are modified in 4.0 such that the entities may use them if their use is managed, that is exceptional circumstances, only one, and then with the limited time frame. Third, with having a proper justification and approval. Fourth, on confirmation user identity, and last but not least, on the actions attributable to the individuals.
Okay.
So these 3 are the major requirement changes that at least which you can see in the front, easy and able to understand quickly what major change that has come by on the requirement perspective. Okay. Another thing that has come as a change is that the vulnerability assessment that in the version 3.2.1 for the internal vulnerability assessment, you do it without the credentials. Now this is made mandatory that you have to do internal vulnerability scans with credentials.
Okay, great. I mean, it means, so again, coming back to our customized approach, just I want to have a more clarity, because being a QSA, it is also important the QSAs to understand the risk of that organization and whatever they defined in the customized approach, because this is something very new for the particularly payment certification domain, because it's always like a defined, because you used to say what is written in the standard, you have to follow that. No, you cannot change it anything, right? So in the customized approach, it means that probably the assessors also should look into the risk of that organization contest and validating the controls. That is very important, right? I mean, earlier in the defined approach, it is like a testing procedures is already given, but in the customized approach, there is no testing procedure. So
they have a defined objective. So interestingly, Vamsi, the decision for each entity, I think using a customized approach as an option is a decision that each entity has to take. Now, based on the entity's choice to implement something other than the defined approach to achieve the requirements of the defined objective, here entities again should work with their QSs and acquirers. very important. As you rightly said, it's the QSA who has to make sure that the approach meets the requirements set forth in the PCI DSS for the customized approach and is acceptable to the acquirer.
Okay. Great. So Nitin, I mean, now now people are calling us, hey, we want the 4.0 certification, not 3.0, even though it is having the transition period. I mean, I know the council mentioned maybe June, second quarter of the June, they will start some trainings. So, I mean, because I know it is very, very difficult because a lot of companies they want to have the 4.0 assessment. So can you please throw out some light, like when this?
Yeah, see, I think at least, immediately no one will be qualified to perform PCI DSS version 4.0 assessments. So, so there will be gap. There will be a time gap to allow the assessors and organization, to become familiar with the standard. That's what I was been talking about. So this is the time you should get as much as familiar that you can, right? And that's where your QSA is going to help you understand these requirements. So ideally, the first training, the transition training that we are looking at in June. So for the existing QSs, no new QSA training is going to come immediately on version 4.0. There is going to be transition training only for the existing QSs. Now, so this is what we are calling it as a transitional training, and I think it will actually cover what changed has been come to the standard, including reportings. And also there is going to be an exam following, which is a computer-based exam to test the knowledge of the TSS 4.0. And then I think if you pass, the QS is pass. If and by the way, the transition training exam is going to be free. It's a free exam, once you take the training. Now, but interesting, if you fail it, the QSA has to bear the cost. So so eventually, this is going to be the scenarios going forward when it comes to whoever is asking about DSS 4.0 implementation. I'm repeating, it's a time when you want to understand the standard, discuss your environment with the QSA, because QSAs have been already, because as you rightly said, Vamsi, you've been part of the RFC processes in the starting when the standard was getting developed. So your QSAs are been having an eye on the standard since the beginning. So they know how this is going to impact you. And this is how this is going to evolve in terms of implementation. So this is the ideal time when you should be having discussions. I think, Vamsi, your team should be busy as crazy at this point, getting these calls on DSS 4.0, how this is going to impact the end user organization and how you should be planning to implement DSS 4.0 as and when you guys are trained to audit the environments.
Yeah. I mean, that's good. Probably, this is the platform you mentioned that. So people understand, hey, it's not like today, we can do that, because we are trying to tell them, before certifying you, we should get qualified, for the transition, the new standard, and it will take some time. So, I mean, that's the reason, I asked this question, because I understand there is some timelines required, not only for the transition, even qualifying the editors itself, So it is a little crazy, but thanks for that clarification, Nitin. So when I'm looking at the things, one thing is clear. Now the standard is talking about the risk analysis, customized approach, and they validating requirements and the authentication requirements. One thing, significant thing, there are 2 points. You can separate. You can answer. One is the 4.0 is not with respect to authenticated requirements, like authentication requirements, like user ID, password policies, and everything. Now also there are a little emphasis on the application systems user accounts also. That is one of the very good change happened. Again, it is the best practice until 2025. The second thing is, I can see there is a, like earlier, the firewall, router, there are kind of a physical environment related terminologies they used almost. Okay. But now they changed that to the kind of a network security control. So do you think this is something like adopting the new technologies, the way the organization running right now? I mean, their cloud environments, and you mentioned in the beginning, it is supporting the blockchain, IoT, and cloud environment. So how we could see this change in the current version?
See, Vamsi, PCI DSS, has always been a technology neutral standard, and I think in that the requirements that you see in the standard are intended to apply to all types of environments. Right now, even if a type of technology is not specifically being called out in the standard, the intent of the security requirements is still largely applicable. So when you talk about version 4.0, it includes refocusing requirements and adding objective statements to better support the technologies. And that's where your customized approach comes, right? Now, specifically to provide entities that that have implemented the strong risk management practices with more flexibility, and if they're using different ways to achieve requirements defined objectives. So that's the purpose of the standard, to cater to the vast area, so that the new technologies, new emerging technologies, whether it is blockchain, IoT, whatever you see in coming in future, the standard is going to support in some way. And because we have been technology neutral, the standard requirements have been defined in such a way that it helps you in meeting those certain requirements.
Yeah, I mean, that's what my question is, because now this 4.0, the new changes, it is more addressing the new technologies such as cloud and mobile. Part of that, that's what I could see that. Okay, that's and one of the thing is greatly, the password. Because earlier used to the 7 characters, always they say, hey, it's the 7 characters. Now it is 12 characters. That is one of the, that is also one of the significant change, So
I agree. So I think cloud, you interestingly point on the cloud. I think, see, what we have done with, is that we have also added some examples to the scope of PCI DSS requirement section to call out the cloud components. Now, we also have reworked on Appendix A1, so which was formerly been known as the shared hosting providers. Now now it is what we have renamed is, or reworked is, the multi-tenant service providers. Now with the definition of that this term is that clearly also includes cloud providers. Now we have also included a new requirement that the multi-tenant service providers have to support their customers, their end customers, for penetration testing services. So this is the new addition, new requirement that has got added to the standard when we talk about the cloud components or the cloud security part.
Okay, that is one. And also another significant thing, it's about the stored account data. I mean, the SAT data. Earlier it was only, mostly it is, most of the requirements talks about only the CHD, but now there is a SAD also included. Now it's most of the places it is saying it's account data you have to protect. Okay. I mean, the SAD data also, you need to consider the retention periods, why you are storing, how long you store. And it means it is expanded the CHD to even the SAD is a part of the accounts data. So that is also, we can see that significant changes in the standards, right?
Yeah, I think see you have to see that PCI DSS is intended, if you look at the standard, so applicability point of view, is intended to all entities that store, process, or transmits the cardholder data, and or your sensitive, which is set, or it could impact the security, anything that is impacting the security of your CD. Now, defining if the account data, I think your cardholder data, sensitive authentication data now are considered the account data. Now, for example, the cardholder data, what it includes? It includes your PAN, which is primary account number, cardholder name, expiry date, and service code. Now, sensitive authentication data includes your full track data, card verification code, and the PIN and PIN box. So this is the new. This is how we are looking at the account data specifically. And talking about the PCI DSS, requirements that applies to entities with the environment with the account data, which is cardholder data, and or sensitive authentication, is stored, processed, or transmitted, and entities with the environment, that can impact the security of CD, is what the account data that we need to cover as part of the PCI DSS requirements when we are scoping, when we are trying to do the scoping for the entities, identifying their scope in terms of the card holder data storage, processing, or transmission.
Okay, so and one good part is right, Nitin, you rightly mentioned, now it is more on the accounts data and also the scoping when it comes to the scoping part. Now, because of this thing they mentioned in that, what is to be included in the in scope of the PCI and not in scope, and there is more clarity is given actually. Earlier is there, but it is now it is more explanatory. The guidance is given in this new standard. It is. I hope people really go through this and they understand what to include, what to not include.
Now, I think
Right?
requirement number 12.5.2, which is the PCI DSS scope, is to be documented and confirmed by entity at least once every 12 months.
Yeah.
And upon significant change to the in-scope environment. So that is the requirement that has been added. So significant change is something that has been important, which is added.
Yeah. So Nitin, let me tell you one thing, because now the PCI is asking to document the scope. I know actually as being a QSA company, actually we followed this practice. So we always used to cover that entire scope in a document, and we are normally most of the company, this is your scope. You have to define like this, So but now it is become a mandate requirement now, and that's very good, because always scope determination is one of the challenging thing what we observe in my experience, because most of the time the changes in the scoping, there is nothing documented. So now since the standard is asking to document the scope, probably it will clear a lot of things, and I mean that's good, Nitin. Thank you very much for that explanation. And I mean according to the, I think most of the things we already covered, and thanks Nitin for giving a lot of insights of this. And also we have a couple of some questions related to the different aspects. Probably my team can answer those. I guess people are giving answers already. And you, other than this, you would like to add anything? Because what I'm just summarizing the things because it's a very short time. We have only after with only 8 minutes now. So the point is that the significant changes in the from the 3.2.1 to 4.0 is mainly the customized approach versus defined approach, and it's giving the flexibility to the organizations to adopt whatever approach they want. And also as a customized approach, as you rightly suggested, it is for the companies who are actually having the good established risk management practices, and a context of that organization, they can define certain frequencies for certain activities. And definitely one thing, it's very clear, they cannot minimize that risk. Either the defined approach, whatever the intent of the defined approach, they have to meet that specific objective by implementing customized approach also. And the timelines which you have mentioned very perfectly, because seems to be it's a very long period, 2 years, but it's not like that, because there is a lot of new requirements, the MFAs, the password implementations, and authentication requirements for the system controls, and roles and responsibilities. That is one of the things which I just added, roles and responsibilities, because earlier it was like in somewhere in the 12th requirement, hey, you have to have the proper roles and responsibilities, or maybe one. But now every requirement wise, it is the standard is asking you how to define roles and responsibilities, accountability. So that is also one of the significant change. I can see that, right? So looking at all these changes, yes, definitely it's good. And also definitely the last point which I mentioned, that is a hosting service provider, that the multi-tenant service providers, that is also one of the key change. I can see that, because the cloud environment, generally nowadays everybody is emerging into the cloud environments, and definitely this new appendix provide the more clarity in terms of how to secure that environments also. And also, as I can see, there are a lot of things are happened, and yes, definitely it will take some time to really digest and understand it and plan the properly. Audience also, I can say that whoever participating, the stakeholders here, you have to take time to understand it. We are coming up with more such kind of awareness sessions with all the stakeholders, and It takes time to understand and refine the responsibilities and prepare that, as he rightly mentioned, Nitin, the PDCA, the Edward Fleming, So the PDCA is one of the thing, I learned that, very long back. Now again, you mentioned that point. So I'm happy to hear the PDCA thing. So the plan needs to be properly defined and act and implement the things and probably the acting on that. So it takes really good amount of time, and particularly, it's good. So we are coming up with more such kind of sessions to make sure we are really understand what is the intent of this new 4.0, how we can adopt that new changes within the organizations, and as a being a QSA company, we can also provide a lot of insights. Once we get more help support from the PCA. I think, Nitin, it's only 5 minutes left over. So you would like to say anything, or,
I had one interesting slide, in fact, which talks about the number of new requirements that have added. So I think you can show the audience about that. I think you just touch point the changes that. So
yeah, actually here, the stall requirements. Okay, let me.
There is one slide that I saw on that. Yeah, this one.
This one.
New requirements will taper in over time, with only 13 of those 64 effectively from being effective immediately when using 4.0. 51 remains best practice. So assume 51 requirements which are best practices until 2025. So I think the last parking remark that I would say, that start your journey now, and rather than feeling sorry when you're in the last leg and you still need time to implement. So this is the time, and this is why the PCI Security Standard Council is giving you that liberty of 2 years to start looking into your environments and see how and where you stand in terms of the implementation of the requirements. We are also doing a PCI SSC symposium, and which is happening in June. So I would request the audience, if you are a participating organization, so you should be able to join that symposium and get more insights on DSS 4.0.
Thank you. Thanks, Nitin. Mr. Ravi, over to you. If anybody is having any questions, we left with only a few. This is a question and answer session. If somebody is having, we left with only 2-3 minutes, not more than that. So, Mr. Ravi, over to you.
Yep. Thank you so much, the esteemed speaker, Mr. Nitin Bhatnagar. And I can see many of them putting their questions on the chat. So we try to take it from there and put it in the Q&A. And thank you so much for Mr. Kalpesh and Venkata sir to been answering to these questions. And I think if there are none, then we can, of course, I think I can see one question on the chat from Rio. I think Mr. Kalpesh is already answering. It is about what is the most critical challenging part while we are about to migrate to the latest version. I think maybe as closing answer, of course, Mr. Kalpesh is writing, but if anybody wants to take up this question.
Ravi, there is one question which has been asked by one of the participants, which is curious, and I would like to take inputs from Mr. Nitin.
Okay.
So what was the question is, would not customized approach leave some level of uncertainty with regards to clearing the certification at the time of audit for the organization? Because different QSAs might look at their implementation differently.
And I think in the customized approach, there are objectives defined. And I think it's something your acquirer, I said just not the QSs, it is the acquirer responsibility as well, who would need to look into the approach that you are taking to implement. So it's very, it's going to be a close knit, but at the same time, entity, QSA, acquirer, all these three entities have to arrive at a consensus when using the customizer. And I already have clarified the customized approach are for those organizations who are risk matured organizations, who have a best practices around risk, and they have a good team who understands the information security. So I'm sure with this kind of knowledge the teams would be having within, and definitely with the support of the QSs and acquirers, I'm sure this is going to go in the right direction.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Mr. Nitin, for this taking up this question and answering it so very convincingly. Thank you so much, and I really wish to thank once again all the participants who took out their time to join this. It was a nice, encouraging attendance, I would say, and it really has a lot of value for us that you took out time to join us. And special thanks to Mr. Nitin. Thanks for taking your time, and we really hope we find more opportunities to connect together like this in the interest of our customers and largely the society. Thank you so much, and have a nice evening and a nice day as appropriate. Thank you so much. Signing off.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Nitin. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.